Welcome all to the Existentialist Society in Melbourne, Australia. Existentialism is an umbrella term covering diverse and often conflicting schools of thought. Consequently, we are not agreed on who or what is an existentialist. We simply agree to disagree. I'm David Miller, Secretary of the Existentialist Society. Now, our guest speaker today is Professor Lance Stoll, and his topic is the Sociology of Evil. Lance, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's my pleasure. I hope I can understand all the Australian accents. It's one of the English dialects that has its own euphemisms and such. But anyways, for 15 years, I was a professor of sociology in the United States, teaching basic sociological subjects. And I realized that sociology, unlike other disciplines, is not unto itself. In other words, you could probably be a physicist and know very little about history. But to be a sociologist, I think you have to have very much a good understanding of history and anthropology and psychology and a whole variety of fields. And so every issue that we tackle from a variety of aspects. And it's one of the things that always frustrates me in the social sciences, that economics is thought of as a real science, while sociology is not thought of as a real science. And to me, as a sociologist, we're open to all realities. So we have to know. I taught a class on sustainability and had to acquaint myself with issues of climate change and energy and all these other things. So there's a whole lot of real science involved in sociology. When I come to this issue, however, I taught classes on marriage and the family and gender and social change, those kind of things. But when we confront the historical issues associated with human injustice and genocide and those kind of things, there was no class constructed by sociology. So I created this class that I called the Sociology of Evil. And to do that, I used not sociological texts, but my basic text was a psychology text. And I also used the historical text that doesn't come up much in this talk, but it's really interesting if you have the interest. It's called Black Edelweiss. It's a very small book written by a young man at the time, 17 years old, who joined the SS at the end of the war. And he very much a Nazi youth, go Germany advocate, who found himself in the same prison camp that the leader, the commandant from Auschwitz was held. And the book is basically just a diary in which you see him in the first chapters being very, very pro-Nazi. And by the end, he's learned the truth of what happened in the situation, and he changes. So his perspective is very political and I think very interesting. But the primary source that I used is Walker, this psychologist. So the other thing that I wanted to point out, a person who's had a real resurgence, if you go online and start looking at people talking about genocide, you come up with Hannah Arendt, philosopher who wound up in America, who gave us this idea of the banality of evil, which is very similar to what Walker is talking about in this book. But why I'm bringing this up is I realize that there's a huge misinterpretation of this data in the current discussion. For instance, people are using and criticizing Hannah Arendt as being an apologist for evil, particularly the trial that was held in Israel of Eichmann, and the other person that we're going to talk about is Philip Zimbardo, who was a psychology professor at Stanford, who did the Stanford prison experiment. And Zimbardo had been a young psychologist under Stanley Milgram, who's the guy that did the research on authority and how people tend to follow authority. And the reason I bring these three individuals up is we are not justifying evil. We are not justifying bad behavior. We're trying to explain it and understand it. And the bottom line is that this behavior is very common in human beings for a variety of reasons. And when you read about people's behavior in the Holocaust, you'll find out that very few people objected and defied the Nazis. Very few. In fact, in Israel, where they have Yad Vashem, the memorial to the Jews who were killed in World War II, they have a place where they honor the righteous, people who stood up to the Nazis. And it's a very, very small group of people. It's like 1,200 people. And there were, again, millions and millions and millions of people who went along. So when we look back at these historical situations and we use modern judgment or our own philosophical judgment, what would we do? You really can't make a decision. You can't judge these people, really. Some of the worst behavior was done by the capos, the Jews themselves, who were forced to assist the Nazis killing other Jews. And again, we think that's horrible, most of us, but what would we have done? And I think that this presentation, and particularly the work of Walker, is about what average, normal, in quotes, people do under such circumstances. Okay, so certainly we're going to talk about the Holocaust, which is the most organized and well-documented genocide, but it certainly isn't the first. In my class, we talked about probably the biggest genocide in human history, which was the Native American genocide perpetrated by Europeans who came to the North American continent and in the end killed hundreds of millions of people. So we had the Armenian genocide. After the Holocaust, we had Rwanda and Cambodia. So we studied all of those things within the course. But in this presentation, we're primarily focusing on the Nazi experience, primarily because they themselves documented it so well that the data is so out there. So let me begin. So this PowerPoint was created about 10 years ago. The book is How Ordinary People Commit Genocide and Mass Killing. That's the James Waller book. James Waller himself, of course, is a psychologist. I'm going to figure out how I can make one slide. How do I make one slide? Does anybody know what to push here to make it so you're not looking at my thing on the side? No?
No, I'm not sure what
I think there's something.
F5, someone suggested you press.
The number 5 on my keyboard?
F5.
F5. F5. No, that.
No.
Okay, you'll have to live with.
Someone else says click slideshow.
Where's slideshow? I don't see that. That's what I was looking for. Slideshow.
On the lower right says,
I see slide sorter. I see
yeah,
normal. Maybe normal, huh?
beside the Zoom bar.
Well,
Well,
no,
where's that?
That didn't do it. Okay, well, just because I don't want to screw it up, I'm gonna just leave this. I'm sorry.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so let's move and let's define some of the words. So we're talking about hate and violence and intolerance and treating other people badly. So we have to define those words. Some of the things are evolutionary. I would argue that if we were not ethnocentric, we would not have survived because human beings were tribes that were competing with one another and fighting for resources. There was very little cooperation. The people who cooperated probably didn't live to reproduce. So this idea that our group is better than your group, the idea of xenophobia, that anybody who's not like me is bad, was an evolutionary benefit for humanity. But like many things in evolution that worked very well thousands of years ago, they've outlived their usefulness. So to be ethnocentric today is crazy because we live in very diverse societies and you'd be fighting and arguing all the time. So it's a behavior. Racism is a behavior that has outlived its usefulness. It's very much like the appendix physically. Apparently, the appendix had value thousands of years ago when we ate raw meat. It emitted material, perhaps, that helped us digest raw meat. But today, the appendix does nothing good for you, but can kill you. And very much I see xenophobia and ethnocentrism in a similar way. But again, when we're looking at these issues, we're looking at racism, we're looking at nationalism, and these isms, these ideas that my group is superior to others, go back in evolution and had benefit long time ago, no longer do, I would argue. So, okay, so I'm not going to read all these slides, but if you have questions, please note them and we can talk about later. Prejudice is taking action. Right? So you can dislike people and just keep it to yourself. But once you have prejudice, you're taking some action. And discrimination certainly is taking action. And the first level of any genocide starts with dehumanizing the victims. So it's very hard to kill somebody if you see them as somebody. But once you dehumanize them, it's quite easy to do. And it's not just people that we think of as the enemy, like Nazis and the Japanese. We, the people, the Allies, very much demonized the people we were fighting as well. We didn't call Japanese soldiers, we called them Japs and all these other things. So that dehumanization goes both ways, right? I'm sorry, my camera seems to have, well, maybe it'll come back. You don't need to see me. Okay. So a lot of this is generated through this desire to have a leader, to have an authoritarian. And again, this probably also goes back evolutionary to our hunter-gatherer times, where a good hunter, a strong guy who could lead the group was very beneficial. And so again, it certainly had an evolutionary benefit. But in all these issues that we're going to discuss, we see authoritarian personalities, and it can be on the right or on the left. So these are not issues purely on the right. It seems that the right and the religious are much more susceptible to authoritarian personality, but it can happen both ways. Okay? A little dated with my guy here, but okay, so with dehumanization, you get infantilization, so that we racists in the South still call Black people boys, right? And it's one of the things that infuriates a Black man more than anything else, and that's the point, is that they treated that person as a child. We very much infantilize women and treat them like children and inferior. And this is something that we see in all of these movements, in all of these places. I put on here this person, Nathan Bedford Forrest, because at the time I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, and there was a high school named Nathan Bedford Forrest High School. And I was from the North, I didn't know. And one of my students said that Nathan Bedford Forrest founded the Ku Klux Klan. And I said, come on, they wouldn't name a school after a guy who founded the Ku Klux Klan. And as I looked into it, they very much did in the 1950s name a school in Jacksonville, Florida for the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. And so my students and I started a movement to change the name of Nathan Bedford Forrest High School. And in the end, we succeeded, and they got rid of that. And you see all over the South in America before Trump that people were getting rid of these racist figure names that had nothing to do with Southern history. They were put into play during the Civil Rights Movement as an insult to African American people. So anyway, that's why I have his name. Okay, so again, here are some of the things we see: anti-immigration movements, nativism. I was here first, therefore I have more rights than somebody else. Xenophobia, fear and hatred of people who are different in any way, right? And one of my favorite movies from the olden days is The War of the Worlds, not the new one, but the old movie. And there's a great scene where the Martians are parked in their spaceships. They haven't come out yet. And a minister, a priest, with his gown on, walks out with a Bible to welcome the Martians to Earth, right? And he's the first guy that gets zapped by the Martians. So xenophobia was a good thing to do a long time ago, right? To fear the outsider. We shouldn't be so happy to welcome the Martians. Where I lost my slide. Okay. Anyway, so you can go. Again, I don't want to spend too much time here. Hate crimes are something we used to map by the FBI. Now under Trump, they're not paid much attention to, but these are crimes perpetrated because you don't like a certain kind of people for one reason or another, right? In America, in the good old days, we thought that was important, and that we should have penalties for people who did things just because those people were Black or they were Jews or for some reason like that. And anyway, okay. And this, of course, is the Ku Klux Klan back in the days when the Ku Klux Klan reigned throughout the South and other parts of the United States. Big parade in Washington, D.C. in the early 20th century. Okay, so let's see. Very interesting when you look at statistics that 75% of Blacks have negative feelings of whites, 50% of Latinos, so forth. 70% of whites don't think there's any problems, right? So your perspective on these issues depends on who you are, right? Certainly. Okay, I'm going to move. By the way, as we move forward, and one of the things that always came up in my classes in the South, where there's a lot of born-again Christianity, is the denial of the role that religion plays in these issues. And you cannot deny the role that religion plays. In fact, you'll see that the Holocaust, the killing of 6 million Jews in the attempt to kill 11 million Jews, happened not because a small group of Nazis in Germany wanted to, but because the preponderance of European Christians were perfectly okay with the idea. And in fact, most of the killing was done by people who for 2,000 years had hated Jews and blamed Jews for killing Jesus and all these other things. So European anti-Semitism fueled the Holocaust. And you cannot deny, and also you cannot deny the role of the Catholic Church in the Holocaust and in the getting of Nazis out of Germany after the war. So the religion is very much a part of this. Okay, so there's other terms that we talk about in this book. Benign prejudice blames inequality on the group targeted, right? So again, in Nazi Germany, they blamed the Jews. It's the Jews' fault for this. We lost World War I because of the Jews, and the Jews betrayed us. And this is always done. In America, you know, we talk about the black on black crime rate. You know, we don't talk about the 400 years of treatment that created the poverty and desperation that probably created the crime rate. But again, we blame the victim for the behavior that is brought against them. Okay. Darwin, by the way, said very little about human beings. And social Darwinism is really a misunderstanding and a misuse of Darwinian ideas. But again, a lot of this is generated by capitalism and one's own self-interest. Okay, meritocracy certainly is an issue where we see a historical role for hate and prejudice in determining the life chances of the entire people. So we have monarchies and families that dominate those kind of things. I'm moving quickly, I'm sorry. We get to the Nazis, and again, we tend not to want to know the history of the Nazi experience. You know, today in America, I'm online all the time, and people say, well, you can't compare what's going on to the Nazi experience. Well, go back and look at the 1920s and 30s in Germany and what was going on. And the fact that Hitler was elected, you know, in perhaps the most democratic society that ever existed, the Weimar Republic. In fact, the Weimar Republic was probably too democratic. There were so many political parties and so little cooperation that a minor party, the Nazi Party, could get control. But again, a lot of things Hitler was saying, he was not alone. There were a lot of people in Germany using the same methodology, scapegoating people and such. Also, remember, this long history of anti-Semitism had little to do with politics and more to do with religion. On top of that, you had this authoritarian tradition in Germany, so that somebody espousing these positions was rapidly accepted. Okay. Also, when the role of charisma cannot be denied in that Hitler was a captivating speaker. And again, Trump to me is just an imbecile. But a lot of people in America think he's a captivating speaker. I'm not sure why, but so there's a lot of similarities, and to deny them really, I think is to just be to want to deny them because it's undeniable in my opinion. But anyway, so most Germans went along with the policies, and most Germans at the beginning benefited from the policies. Okay, so again, the Jews who were successful, their money, their possessions, their jobs were given to fine white Christian Germans. So they benefited from the behavior. Okay, so we like to think that the perpetrators of the genocide are terrible, horrible monsters. And this is where Hannah Arendt made this point about Eichmann, that he was just a bookkeeper. He was not a monster. And that is not to excuse him. In fact, I think it makes it more horrifying. What is most horrifying about the Holocaust and about genocide in general is that normal, good people go along. And that's the message here, I think, is that, we like to classify Hitler as a monster and the few people around him as monsters. But the reality is there were hundreds of thousands of perpetrators in the Holocaust. And in fact, some of the greatest perpetrators were not even German. Ukraine did horrendous things. People from Ukraine supporting the Nazis, people in Poland supporting the Nazis, in the Soviet Union. So this is the message of extraordinary evil, I think, is that ordinary people participate. People who know better participate. Okay. Again, for 1 million people to be killed, many thousands of people must be willing to kill. Genocide is not a choice, but absolute evil. Okay? So what is it? It's the result. By the way, remember that the word genocide didn't exist until 1944. We had no word in the English language that meant killing people because of who they are. And although we were doing it all over the place, there was no word that meant that. So the genocide is a word that came out of the Holocaust. And it's the result of ethnocentrism, religious fundamentalism, and the depersonalization and dehumanization of the victim. So it's the result when justice is gone, when there is no justice. Right? The German justice system was turned around to perpetrate injustice. And this is what my fear is of what we see in the United States today, that the justice system is part of the perpetration problem here. Anyway. Okay, these behaviors haven't stopped. After the Holocaust, after World War II, everybody said never again, never again, never again. But it's happened again and again and again and again. And look, it says here, 3 high fatality struggles have been in action somewhere in the world at any moment since 1900. So this has not stopped. We have wars all over the place. We have genocide all over the place. We've had bizarre genocides like Rwanda and Cambodia. The Cambodian genocide is probably the weirdest of all. You know, they killed the smartest people in their country. That's who the genocide was against, the intelligent people. The Rwandan genocide is very much about colonialism because of the colonial country, I believe it was Belgium, favored the Tutsis over the Hutus. The Tutsis were a very small minority who had more European facial features. So the Europeans gave them the better jobs, gave them better education. When they left, the Tutus were the only people who knew how to run the country, so they became the government, but they were a minority. And eventually the Hutus took their vengeance against the Tutsis. So we've seen genocides again and again for, again, sometimes very bizarre reasons, but we haven't learned this lesson and we haven't come to never again. Population is the problem, right? Exponential population growth, unequal distribution of land and resources, the growth of wealth. These are all issues that have poisoned the well, so to speak, made it worse. But again, Waller comes back and back to this point that this is in our character as human beings. And it has to be dealt with in a psychological way and an educational way, because it's something that we average people tend to do. I'm just going to skip. Wiesenthal was a famous Nazi hunter. Again, we've seen this over and over again. It's funny how sometimes people who we see as evil, horrible people are seen as heroes by others. In Transylvania, Vlad the Impaler is thought of as a hero because he stopped the Muslim invasion in Europe, right? Our character of Dracula is taken from the character of Vlad the Impaler. But what did he do? He took Muslim army forces and killed them by impaling them on the ground, right? Putting a stick through them, and they died slowly and horribly and screamed as they were dying, and that scared the Muslims away, and he saved his country with this horrendous behavior. So and people see Hitler in a similar way, saving his country. But remember that the distinction here is extraordinary evil is deliberate. So deliberate harm perpetrated under the sanction of political, social, or religious groups. Okay, so what the Nazis did in Germany was perfectly legal. They changed the laws and made it perfectly legal, right? In America today, we're taking Hispanic children off the street and sending them to camps in other countries, apparently within the law, right? So anyway. And here here's the thing about genocide, that 1948, we made it a international convention to prevent this from happening again. So who were the killers? If we look at Holocaust or the Holocaust, they estimate that 100,000 to 500,000 people were active executioners during the final solution. These were not all Germans. These were not all Nazis. These were not all SS people. These were people all over Europe who were more than happy to kill their neighbors, take their property, and benefit from the situation. And again, these were people who were their neighbors and their friends and who they worked with. One would think that you wouldn't want to do that, but this happens in the human experience. So it's ordinary people like you and me who commit these killings. And again, when we look back and we want to judge and we want to say, not me, I wouldn't have done that. Well, you know, who knows, right? If they held a gun to your son or daughter's head, you might participate. And again, what Waller is pointing out is more often than not, people do participate. And that is why he calls that extraordinary evil. Okay. By the way, I didn't say this before. I should have. Evil is usually a term we use in religion, right? It's usually a term like sin that only comes up when you're talking about religion. But he's using it here to talk about this particular behavior of human beings that is cruel and torturous towards other people. Okay. Again, it's not new. And in this presentation, I've kind of focused on the Holocaust, but in the class, we talked about all these incidences where people were demonized and dehumanized and eventually murdered in bulk. You know, this was taught in America, so that was a prime example. If I were to teach this class in Australia, I'd probably be talking about Aboriginal people who were treated similarly. So this has been done again and again all over the world. Okay. By the way, the Holocaust, if you want to call it that, in North America, is a little bit different in that most people who died of disease rather than out and out murder. Now, later on, British people realized that they could spread disease on purpose. But most of the people, particularly in South America, who died of things like the common cold that they had no immunity to. And so in this statistic, it says 90% died from disease. Okay. Okay, and again, you're talking well over 100 million people lived in North and South America, and today it's about 2.7 million of those native people remain. And that's true worldwide, by the way, that Aboriginal people, native people, are almost eliminated everywhere. Although this looks like Stephen Miller in America, it's actually Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, who was very important in disseminating this misinformation and making sure that the schools taught this information. And when you follow the Nazi youth movement, one of the most frightening things is how quickly you could turn a society by starting with children, how quickly you could turn those children by controlling what they were learning. And again, Goebbels was an evil genius in making that happen. I'm trying to go quickly, I'm sorry. Okay, so I called this achievements because I use the word achievements here on purpose because much of the data that we have, the statistical data, the photographic data, was kept by the Nazis because they thought it was an achievement. They thought at the end, when they won, this would be something to be very proud of. And you would think that you would destroy these type of records, but when you're proud of what you're doing, you don't destroy it, right? So it's estimated that about 20 million unarmed people were killed. We focus on the Jews because it was so deliberate, but there were lots of other people, Slavs and Gypsies and the political left that they didn't like that were killed. Remember that it all began in Germany with eugenics, by killing people who were not necessary or were a drain on society. People like the mentally ill and the physically deformed. Much of the ideology that the Nazis developed or perpetrated was actually developed in the American South. The eugenics movement was very popular in the United States. And much of what the Nazis did was just expanding what had already started in the United States. Okay. So there are the same proportion of psychopaths, sadists in regular society that there were in these societies. It's not that they were crazy or brutal beyond what people are. They were willing executioners. That's the point. We like to say that there was a Nazi personality and unique to these people. But you look at things like ambition and low ethical standards and nationalism. We see these in the United States today. We see these everywhere. It's not unique to the Nazis. And again, whenever you hear people talk about the Nazi experience, they want to say that it was a unique thing in human history. Never before, never again. That's just not true. It fits perfectly within human behavior. We just don't want to acknowledge it's actually part of human behavior, these bigoted, hateful attitudes. Okay. It's funny when I have Einstein here, when you think about the biggest mistake the Nazis made in World War II was getting rid of the Jews at the beginning, right? Had he kept all the Jewish scientists that were in Germany working for Germany, that might have helped them to win the war, right? They might have got the bomb, they might have got everything else. So at the Holocaust Museum in New York, on the wall, there's a very interesting exhibit. It says that Jews made up about 3%, 2 to 3% of German society. And yet 70% of the German, what do you call the Nobel Prize winners were Jews. So they were highly educated, highly successful scientists in German society, but they got rid of them too soon. So these are the sociological reasons why ordinary people become killers. Okay, they buy into these collective values. We are better than they are. They have this authoritarian orientation that they want to follow the great leader. They want to dominate. Okay, they have us-them thinking, right? These are not real Germans. These are different from us, right? Moral disengagement, the ability to separate what they think of as morality from how you treat these people in morality. Blaming the victims for their own suffering, right? Professional socialization, I'm not sure at this point what he meant there. Group identification, we're the dominant group. Aryans are the superior human being, right? In America today, by the way, we're importing white South Africans while we're getting rid of Hispanics and other people. It's truly amazing. Another psychologist who's very prominent in discussions of the Holocaust and genocide is Erich Fromm. And again, I'm not going to go into Erich Fromm here, but highly important ideas that he brings up. So I think a lot of this goes way, way, way back. And again, this is why I think some of it is evolutionary. Evolution only is concerned with keeping a species going. It has no moral content. And, early on, surviving meant you had to get rid of competitors. And so these ideas of xenophobia go very far back, right? And some of these things are still valuable, some are not. I don't know about you, but I hate snakes, and I'm really terrified of snakes. Does it make sense in modern society to waste much of my brain fearing snakes? I mean, am I likely to come in contact with a snake? Probably not, right? But thousands of years ago, we're wandering around and reaching into trees. If you weren't afraid of snakes, you were dead. So it was a valuable fear to have at that point. Today, it could make you crazy for no reason at all. So sometimes we look at these behaviors and say, they're so counterproductive, but that's today that they're counterproductive. They may have been very productive in their own time. A lot of this, again, is perpetrated by things that religion says. Certainly, there are genocides in the Bible. The deity, the all-knowing, all-wise, all-loving deity tells the Jews to go in and kill every man, woman, child, and animal. Why? But again, so these attitudes are justified many ways, and religion is the biggest way. So again, I said that this is on the left and on the right. We like to think of Stalin and the Soviets as leftists, which I guess they were, but they were autocrats. There's really not much difference in my mind between Stalin and Hitler. And Stalin killed 60, 70 million people as well. So these attitudes go on both sides of the political spectrum. Some of this is repetitive. That's why I'm kind of going quickly. Here, I put a quote up here because of the war in Iraq. George Bush said, "You're either with us or against us, right? You're either with us or against us." Perfect. It's just perfect. When I was a kid and people were defying the Vietnam War, it was love it or leave it, right? If you don't love America, get out of here, right? And so these attitudes come and are always with us. The role of religion, again, the Grand Mufti or the Grand Imam of Islam supported the Nazis. But there were people in Islam, particularly in North Africa, who protected Jews. So it's not all, but enough that the Nazis were quite successful. This is Pope Benedict at the top. Now, in his defense, a German kid had to go into the Nazi youth, but it's a bad face. It's a bad picture for a pope, I think. The Catholic Church, the Vatican, never came out against the Holocaust or the Nazis. Even though individual Catholics, there are a few Catholics at Yad Vashem who were honored for their actions, but very, very few. This is just explaining or showing how they demonized and separated and and were able to do, they didn't take Jews from their homes in 1932 and put them in Auschwitz. This happened in different phases. So by the time they disappeared, they had already disappeared. People didn't even notice it anymore. So the evil genius of what the Nazis did is how organized it was. That's why, when people say, well, there are other genocides, why don't you talk about that? I think the reason we talk so much about the Nazi experience is that this was a highly modern society, a highly intelligent, well-organized society, and everything was done in a very systematic way. And I think that makes it both shocking and ordinary at the same time, right? What Eichmann was saying about he was just making sure that the trains ran on time is a true statement. Many people were just doing their job. They didn't have, it didn't get into their morality that what they were doing was wrong. And at the same time, if you read about the experience with the German army, the rate of alcoholism was very high. These guys would kill people all day long and they couldn't sleep at night. They'd get unbelievably drunk so they could go to sleep. So at some level, they did know that this was morally horrendous, but they were able to perpetrate it anyway. This is just illustrating this us and them thinking. As long as you can make those people evil and wrong, then what you do to them is morally okay, right? I didn't kill a person. I killed vermin, right? In Rwanda, the Hutus called the Tutsis cockroaches, right? What do we do with cockroaches? We step on them, we squish them, right? And so this us-them thinking and dehumanizing, very common in all of these situations, and we still do it, right? You probably know slurs in your country for people that they don't like, right? For trans people, for gay people, for Black people, whatever. We have these less than human terms for those people. I put this picture here for my students because at the time, Iran was saying, we don't have gay people in Iran. And we had a class about gender where I told them that there were gay people everywhere. There's always been gay people. And somebody would say, well, how come there's no gay people in Iran? And this is why. If you're gay in Iran, they kill you. And actually, they give you a choice. You can get a sex change and become a woman and not die, or they'll kill you. So at the same time, in America, there are many people that would like to do the same thing, and probably will begin to do that soon. Okay. So the moral justification, why it's good to do what we're doing, right? It's an appropriate response to the crisis. In America today, they're talking about how immigrants are invading America, right? Like it's an army coming across the border. So what you do to an invading army, anything you want to get rid of them, right? Moral imperatives, right? You got to eliminate these people. You justify it religiously and ideologically, and these behaviors become moral. You're redefining the morality, right? So everybody knows that killing innocent people is wrong. There's no justification for it. It's wrong, right? I mean, somebody's going to bring up what's going on in Palestine, and I agree it's wrong. Whether you call it genocide or not, killing innocent people, starving them to death, is immoral. Why are we arguing about it? It should be stopped. It's immoral, right? How can you support it? But somehow we do. Euphemisms are, I love euphemisms. You know, these are ways you could say terrible things that don't sound so bad, right? So over the gates of Auschwitz, it said, Albrecht macht free. Work makes one free, knowing that nobody got out of there, right? So most of the people that went through this gate went right to the gas chambers and were killed immediately, right? But euphemisms, you know, if you read George Orwell, he did a lot of these euphemisms. Today in America, there's lots of euphemisms for what they're doing. But anyways, it reduces your personal responsibility. It redefines the acts of evil, that they're not so bad, right? Soldiers say waste instead of kill, right? We hear things like surgical strikes. You know, the euphemism of a surgical strike sounds like, you know, you went in and just got the cancer and didn't hurt anything else, right? But that's not the reality. There's lots of collateral damage, right? The Soviets used to talk about liquidating, right? We have the term ethnic cleansing. Sounds nice, right? Ethnic cleansing. We're just cleaning it, right? In Rwanda, they used to talk about brush clearing. So euphemisms are always used here. By the way, in Cambodia, the reason if you read about the Cambodian genocide, it's just the oddest one. One of the reasons why Cambodia today is such a poor country is that all of the brain power that they had in that country, they eliminated. Right? They eliminated, it got so bad in Cambodia that if you wore eyeglasses, they would kill you because they figured you wouldn't have owned eyeglasses if you didn't read, so you're dangerous, right? People who had a little bump on their nose from their eyeglasses were killed. So, I mean, it is absolutely the craziest, but the communists who were running Cambodia wanted it to be an agricultural society. So they marched people out of the cities and into the fields. So there are many crazy reasons behind a lot of this. Again, you have to demonize the enemy. So the Germans were really good at that. And little children read these comic books too. Before they were in school. By the time they got into school, these images appeared in their textbooks, and they just took it for granted, right? If you read the Black Edelweiss, the book I told you about at the beginning, you know, he talks about how this was just the way it was. I mean, we didn't question that this is what we were taught, and we thought this was the reality of the world. And so by starting with education, that's when you know this is really a concerted effort. This is not just an accident. You know, what's the first department that the Trump administration has attacked? The Department of Education, right? They're attacking universities all over the United States. Why? Why would you do that? So dumbing down young people is very important for their future power. And again, very quickly. I mean, think about it. If a child learns for 7, 8 years something, by the time they graduate, they're fully on board with the regime. This is Rwanda, this picture. So when I was teaching with young people. I taught a class on climate change as well, and it gets really, really dark, and you look out at the faces of these young people, and you've just told them that they have no future, that the world is about to die, and you don't want to leave them that way. So I always would try to bring some positive in the climate change argument. I talk about all kinds of new technology that was hopeful, and here you have to look for something positive as well. So things like exponential growth. When I first started teaching this class, exponential growth, unending growth looked like the future. But what we've seen is that things have stabilized. It's expected that the population is going to stabilize around now, and that exponential growth is probably not the fear that we had a long time ago. In fact, we find that if you look at societies that have built a middle class, that the population has peaked as the middle class. So it's really an economic issue, population control. If you educate people and provide them with decent lives and jobs, the population automatically stabilizes. And it's logical. If you have 10 kids and you have a farm, you need those 10 kids to do the farm labor. But if you live in a city and you make a decent amount of money, 2 kids is about all you can afford. And so population goes down. And so this was one of the positive things. Now, at the same time that I began teaching this, we had the Abu Ghraib prison situation in Iraq. That's what this is here. And Zimbardo, Dr. Zimbardo, who gave us the Stanford prison experiment, testified on behalf of the torturers in Abu Ghraib. And his argument was not that they were doing good things. He admitted and acknowledged that torturing was a bad thing. His argument, which really has yet to be denied, is that they were doing what they were ordered to do. The CIA told these young soldiers they needed to loosen up the detainees, and they allowed them to do that loosening up any way they want. And so Zimbardo, based on his experience, where giving authority to people empowered them to behave badly. Now, his defense didn't help. These people were still sent to jail, but his argument is still a valid argument. I don't know if you know about the Milgram experiment in the 1960s, but basically Milgram, and since Milgram, many people have duplicated these experiments, basically found that 70% of people will do what they're told, period. Whether they know it's right or wrong, whether they're moral or not, whether they're religious or not, they'll just do what they're told without question, right? Which is a horrifying statistic when you think about it. Only like 10% of people will say, you want me to electrocute people? No, I'm not going to do that, and will walk away, right? Other people, 10% or so, will do it a little bit, but when it looks bad, they'll stop, right? But most people, ordinary people, will do what the person in authority tells them to do. And the Milgram experiment has been done many different ways. And they find that if the person telling you to do something has a uniform on, they get higher compliance, right? So if the guy has just a suit on, 70%. But you put a lab coat on that guy, or you put a uniform with epaulets and medals, you get much higher compliance. And so the human propensity to follow authority is built into us. And again, you can argue that it had evolutionary benefits thousands of years ago, okay? Remember that In sociology, we're interested in how people behave and react to one another. In psychology, they're interested in what's going on in your own head. And this whole course was kind of a combination of both, because you need to understand what's going on in somebody's head to understand how they're treating one another. And one of the greatest quotes from Martin Luther King is actually a copy of a quote from Gandhi, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, which again is why you need to defend the weakest of us. This is the famous quote from the minister in Germany when they came for the Jews. I didn't do anything because I was not a Jew and so forth. Then they came for me and there was nobody left to talk for me. And, you know, again, in America today, we have this issue with trans people, an unbelievably small minority. And I read an article this morning that gay people are beginning, the gay organizations are beginning to expel the trans people, are beginning to turn on them, right? And again, this is what happens. For your own self-protection, you're going to turn on a group that is being discriminated against under you. And this is why this idea of injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, because you will be affected eventually. I'm not going to go into this one. One of my heroes in life is Sir Nicholas Winton. If you don't know him, I very much suggest you Google him. This was just an ordinary man before World War II who went to Czechoslovakia and found out that Jews were being treated very badly and decided to help children, Jewish children, get to England until after World War II, and saved 600 children. And then the war started, and he just forgot about it. He never said a word about it. Until the 1980s, his wife found a scrapbook in the attic, and it all came out that he did this. And the man never felt that he was extraordinary. He just felt like, I did what I should have done, right? I could help, so I did, right? And the only reason that Nicholas Winton is not one of the righteous in Yad Vashem is that one of his grandparents was Jewish, and the righteous are supposed to be non-Jews, so he's not honored for that reason. But again, a truly decent man. He's not Jesus Christ, right? He's just a decent man. And one of the things that's so attractive about him is that that's how he presents himself. He doesn't say, I'm a great guy, I did a great thing. I did what anybody should have done. And he's right, of course. But so few people did anything that you have this memorial in Yad Vashem for 1,000 people. This is another, if you ever get to Miami, this is a very impressive memorial in Miami for the Holocaust. And this, of course, is a lampshade made from a human being, made from human skin. So not only was the behavior despicable, but horrifying in many ways. Again, why do we kind of focus on the German genocide over other genocides? Because we have so much evidence of it, and horrifying evidence of it. Okay, here's the quote about Nicky Winton, a decent man. And I think the lesson when you read this book, when you study the Holocaust, when you do the sociology of evil, is that treating other people in a decent way is just the right way to be. It's not about, any deep philosophical issues. It's just treating people as you'd like to be treated in a decent way is a better way to behave. And it's the humanistic way. You know, when I talk to people about Christianity and I watch something that you can't be a moral person if you don't believe in God, it's ridiculous. You know, decency is the most moral virtue, in my opinion. And that's what we learn from the study of evil. So, okay, so thank you for letting me get through it. How do I unshare?
Well,
How do oh, here, stop. Okay.
well, thank you, Lance, for that presentation.
Thank you.
On the sociology of evil.
Oh, I'm looking at a question here. If